In the first 5 episodes of TurboViews Extra, we took a closer look at the TurboGrafx consoles and add-ons released in North America, eventually combining them all together in a demystification video at the end. Well, before TurboViews comes to an official close, there are still a few goodies that were part of the TG-16's short life that I would like to discuss. This includes various packaging, accessories, and magazines. So join me for a little TurboViews Extra supplementary. In the 6th demystification episode, we talked about the various game formats on the TurboGrafx, as well as what you needed to play each one. This obviously includes TurboChip, CD-ROM, and Super CD. Well, for the completist collectors out there, and you know who you are, I thought it would be beneficial to talk about how the games came packaged for release in North America. There were a total of 94 Turbo Chips, 21 CD-ROM, and 23 Super CD games released here, making for a total of 138 unique releases, every single one of which we reviewed in TurboViews, but you already knew that, right? However, to understand how they were packaged, you need to remember that the TurboGrafx was handled by 2 different groups. The initial NEC release from 1989 to 1992, and the Turbo Technologies takeover from 1992 to 1993. Let's start with the NEC beginnings. Every game during this era was released in a skinny cardboard box containing a jewel case holding the game and manual. It also had a piece of styrofoam in there to, push the jewel case toward the top of the box. And of course, pamphlets, ads, and well, the occasional poster, or even miscellaneous game-related goodies. Turbo chips were in a jewel case that incorporated a chip holder, while CD games were inside a generic CD case with an insert that often just said CD. The earlier chip games had bright orange across the strip on the case, but later they started incorporating a color coding system based on the genre of game, although they scrapped that idea in some later incarnations, so there's no real consistency with most of it. No matter what game you look at during this era, it was pretty much this way, so you'll be looking for a box and an original case. Now, obviously, there are always random exceptions to this, like Keith Courage and Alpha Zones. Since it was the pack-in game with the TurboGrafx, there was no box, and the jewel case didn't even have a traditional holder. It had some sticky stuff to kind of hold the chip in place, but it worked. Now, let's talk about the Turbo Technologies era. Things changed here somewhat. The Turbo Chip games were still in the same size of skinny box, however, they were much lighter. Why is that? Because they did away with the jewel cases and instead slipped in a clear plastic tray which held the chip and manual, and well, the pamphlets and ads and etc. You'll notice in TurboViews that they are often in a jewel case, and that's because TurboZone Direct back in the day used to sell blank cases, and I scooped them up, for consistency's sake. I also printed out my own label with the title. However, Sparky labels make some excellent versions which I recommend you track down. Now, the CD and Super CD games were simply released in their individual CD case, shrink-wrapped. The barcode and information about the game was now printed directly to the insert. So these games have no box, although again, some crafty collectors out there have figured ways around this. Some of the jewel cases were oversized due to large manuals or included posters, but they also were released shrink-wrapped sans box. Again, the only real exception to this was the exclusive pack-in game with the Turbo Duo, Gate of Thunder, which came in a plain case with a white spine. No box, no insert. But since this was a multi-disc, we did get manuals for Gate of Thunder, along with Bonk's Adventure and Bonk's Revenge. All three, by the way, had Turbo Technologies stamped on the back. Plus, there were two Working Designs games that had a wraparound cover shrink-wrapped over the top of the jewel case. This includes Exile 2 and Bastille. These are often missing or damaged, but some reproductions are floating around. And that is a look at the various packaging. Of course, there are always some exceptions to the exceptions I talked about, like Eastbook 1 and 2, the Duo version, which was packed in with the Turbo Duo. Like Gate of Thunder, it came in a plain white case with a white spine and no box. Or the NEC titles that were packed in with the Turbo Duo, which also had no box and no jewel case. I'm sure there might be a few random weird things I'm missing here, but hopefully this will help collectors get started on their TurboGrafx collections. There is a ton of stuff online that you can find to research these, so I definitely recommend it. Now, we talked about the consoles and games, plus packaging, but we can't forget the various accessories. Obviously, there are a ton of third-party goodies out there, such as this wireless joystick, thanks to my friend Chris on this little gift. But since TurboViews is about official North American releases, that is the criteria we will follow here as well. There aren't a ton, but here goes. Obviously, you got one TurboGrafx TurboPad controller with the console, but you could buy multiple ones as they were sold separately. This, I think, is self-explanatory. With that said, let's also mention the Duo Pad, the Turbo Duo equivalent packed in with the Turbo Duo. It also was sold separately and is very similar in design. However, it has the smaller connector for the Duo console. Speaking of this smaller connector, we have the TurboGrafx-16/Duo adapter. If you were a previous TG16 guy like myself, and also picked up a Turbo Duo like myself, you could use this adapter, which transformed the larger connector of the TurboGrafx console into the smaller one for the Duo. For me, this came in handy for a couple of things. Firstly, it allowed me to use the Turbo Stick, which I always called the NES Advantage of the TG16. This was my go-to controller back in the day when I played my TurboGrafx. I loved the large buttons and the joystick felt good. With the adapter, I could now use it with my Duo. Secondly, the Turbo Tap. If you wanted to play more than one player at a time, you needed a tap, as the console only had one stupid input, which we've talked about in the past. It can hold up to 5 controllers, hence why having turbo pads sold separately was a necessity. The adapter allowed me to use this also on my Duo. However, unlike the stick, which was not re-released in the Duo era, there was a Duo Tap. It was essentially the same as above, but white. It did require Duo controllers unless you had multiple adapters. Then you could use multiple adapters with your multiple turbo controllers inside the Duo Tap. You know what? It got confusing, so forget it. So those are the accessories for controlling the games. What else? Well, let's talk about the Turbo Booster. The TurboGrafx-16 only had an RF connection for connecting your console to the TV. Well, if you removed the back plate on the TG16 and installed the Turbo Booster, it gave you the option of RCA outputs, taking advantage of composite video and stereo sound. Plus, if you had the Turbo Booster Plus, you could have that as well as built-in memory, so you could save games. Just like the CD-ROM attachment did, by the way. So if you were planning on snagging the CD-ROM, there was really no point to any of the boosters. The Turbo Express put the TG16 in the palm of your hand. for the 45 minutes or so that the 6 batteries lasted. Well, luckily, you had the AC adapter, allowing you to plug the Express into the wall, kind of defeating the portability concept. And the car adapter, which is exactly what you'd expect, connecting the Express to the vehicle's cigarette lighter. I don't believe NEC ever released an official rechargeable battery pack. However, I remember TurboZone Direct had one for sale in their catalog. As a kid, I always kicked myself for not picking this up, third party or not. Also, we need to mention the Turbo Vision accessory that, when we had over-the-air analog signals, allowed you to watch TV broadcasts on your Turbo Express. The power went out when I was a kid once, late at night, and I tested this feature. It worked. It also included an RCA audio-video input, so you could use the Express as a mini monitor. And finally, for the Turbo Express, we have the Turbo Link cable for connecting multiple Turbo Expresses for multiplayer. But you know, not many games actually utilize this. Then again, finding someone else who had a Turbo Express and the same game as you, that was kind of rare. Now quickly, let's revisit the TurboZone Direct flyers once more because you may have noticed a bunch of accessories we didn't cover. TZD had a lot of stuff you could get, from extension cables to chip cases and sleeves to original replacement parts for your console. So you see, there are more items floating around you could consider accessories. I mean, some would say the Super System card is an accessory, and I guess it kind of is. Shoot, I've had some people say the TurboGrafx Mini, which is more recent but official, is also an accessory. I don't know about that. But as far as items that were sitting on store shelves back in the day, I think we covered most of them. If you know of any official stuff that came out back then that I did not mention here, please leave a comment below. That way we can help any collectors out there who want to accessorize their TurboGrafx-16. One of my favorite ads packed in with the games and consoles were the various merchandise ads showcasing items you could purchase to show off your TG16. That Turbo Chip wallet I always thought was super cool. And man, I always wanted that Splatterhouse and that Devil's Crush t-shirt. I should have picked those up when I had the chance. Now I know I have seen various other items floating around, but I'd like to quickly reminisce about Turbo Play magazine, a publication I always called the Nintendo Power of the TurboGrafx. I know there are detractors out there who didn't really care for it, but for me, it was a really fun magazine related to this small exclusive club, the TurboGrafx owner. I sent out for my subscription right after getting my TG16 in the summer of 1991. In fact, my first issue had Bonk on the cover, so that was a perfect start. I then picked up the back issues to catch up. Turbo Play was released bi-monthly and was published by LFP from June-July 90 until August-September 92 for a total of 14 issues. There were tips and tricks with large maps and strategy guides for various games, especially those of the hottest ones at the time. Closer Look was a review section focusing on new release titles. Coming Soon had games that were coming soon. Turbo Tips had regular tips and codes, and Turbo Mail included letters from readers. Some would say standard stuff, but since it was all TurboGrafx related, as a kid, I was pretty excited. If we flip through quickly all the issues, you had various contests, from telling us your favorite Turbo game, drawing contests, name the game. Oh, by the way, I just tried that one and was able to do it 100%. See? TurboViews wasn't for nothing. Eventually, they started Games Around the World, which would give you an insight into the PC Engine and what was available overseas, which may or probably not make it to America. And Turbo News, for news on the Turbo. I also loved the CES and Tokyo Toy Fair and show reports, as they always had unique upcoming items to showcase. Oh yeah, and there were tons of ads, but some of them were actually kind of cool. I remember sitting on the school bus reading these issues, sometimes multiple times. It felt like such a small, exclusive club, and it was a lot of fun. You also had the Turbo Edge newsletter. You had the Turbo Force magazine, which came packaged in the Turbo Duo. And you also had Duo World, which was basically an update to Turbo Play, but only lasted a few issues. But at the end of the day, it was Turbo Play that was really special to me. And that's it, folks. The end of TurboViews Extra Supplementary and the end of TurboViews Extra. If you have any memories or extra goodies to talk about, please share them in the comments below. I would love to hear your history with any of these items. Thanks for watching, and take care.